The iron shackles bit cruelly into Cora Patterson's wrists as she slumped against the damp stone wall of Redemption's jail. The indignity of her situation matched only by the burning injustice of it all. She had been in this hellhole for 3 days now, accused of a stagecoach robbery she didn't commit, with nothing but the cold promise of a hanging to look forward to. Cora wiped away a tear with her bound hands, the chains rattling against the cell bars. At 22, she hadn't expected her life to end this way, condemned for another's crime in a town where she knew almost no one. She had only arrived in Redemption 2 weeks ago, hoping to start anew as a seamstress after leaving her troubled past in St. Louis behind. Now she was paying for someone else's misdeeds, with Sheriff Donovan Maxwell seeming all too eager to see her swing. "Water, Miss Patterson?" Deputy Collins pushed a tin cup through the bars, his young face betraying a hint of sympathy that his boss lacked. Cora accepted it with as much dignity as she could muster. "Thank you, Deputy. Any word on when the judge arrives?" The deputy shifted uncomfortably. 3 days' time. Though I wouldn't get your hopes up. Sheriff's convinced the witness identification is solid. "That witness is either blind or lying," Cora replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "I was mending Mrs. Harris's wedding dress during that robbery. She can vouch for me." "Sheriff says Mrs. Harris is just being kind to a newcomer." The deputy shrugged apologetically. "Says the eyewitness from the stagecoach is certain it was a woman with red hair who held them up. And, well..." He gestured awkwardly at Cora's distinctive copper locks. In a town of mostly brunettes and blondes, her hair color made her stand out, and apparently made her an easy scapegoat. "That doesn't make me guilty," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The deputy had no response to that. He simply nodded and retreated to his desk, leaving Cora alone with her thoughts and the increasingly heavy weight of her predicament. Outside the small jailhouse window, the sun was setting over the rugged landscape of the Arizona Territory. It was 1876, and the promise of a new life that had drawn Cora westward was fading as quickly as the daylight. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about the gallows being constructed in the town square. 40 miles away, Isaac Kincaid pushed his exhausted stallion harder as darkness fell across the desert. The message had reached him just hours ago at the Lazy K Ranch, carried by a breathless stable boy from town who knew of the connection between Isaac and the young woman now sitting in Redemption's jail. "They're saying she robbed the Tucson stage," the boy had panted. "Sheriff's got her locked up tight. Judge Parsons is coming from Yuma to sentence her." Isaac hadn't wasted a moment. He knew Cora Patterson better than anyone in these parts had known her since they were both children back in Missouri, before life and circumstances pulled them in different directions. He knew with absolute certainty that Cora was no thief or outlaw. "Come on, Thunder," he urged his horse, feeling the animal's labored breathing between his legs. "We'll rest soon, I promise." The moon rose higher in the night sky, illuminating the harsh terrain. Isaac's mind raced faster than his horse's hooves. Sheriff Maxwell had never liked him, a lingering resentment from when Isaac had publicly questioned the lawman's heavy-handed tactics with the local Apache tribe. If Maxwell learned that Isaac was coming for Cora, he might expedite matters before a proper trial could be held. The thought sent a chill through Isaac that had nothing to do with the desert night air. He patted the revolver at his hip and the Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard. He wasn't planning on using them, but if it came to protecting Cora, there wasn't much he wouldn't do. His mind drifted to the last time he'd seen her, nearly 5 years ago. They had been barely more than children then, he 17 and she 16, when her family decided to leave their small Missouri town for St. Louis after the war. Their goodbye had been awkward, filled with unspoken feelings and the promise to write letters that eventually became less and less frequent until they stopped altogether. Then, 2 weeks ago, he'd spotted her in town, standing outside the general store looking lost and more beautiful than his memories had preserved. Before he could approach her, a client had called him away on ranch business. He'd promised himself he would find her later, but now it seemed fate had forced his hand in the cruelest way possible. Isaac's determination hardened as he rode through the night. Dawn would find him in redemption, and he would not leave without Cora. The night in the jail cell was the longest of Cora's life. The thin blanket provided little protection against the chill, and every sound from the scurrying of mice to the occasional drunken shouts from the saloon down the street set her nerves on edge. Sleep came in fitful bursts, broken by nightmares of nooses and angry mobs. Morning brought no relief. Sheriff Maxwell appeared, his weathered face set in grim lines as he unlocked the cell door. "Time to get some air, Miss Patterson," he announced, though his tone suggested this was no act of kindness. Two deputies flanked him as Cora was led outside, her shackles clinking with each step. The bright morning sun temporarily blinded her after days in the dimly lit cell. When her vision cleared, her heart sank. A crowd had gathered in the street, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "There she is," someone called out. "The stage robber." "My brother was on that coach," another voice joined in. "Nearly shot him, she did." Cora held her head high, though inside she was trembling. "I've never robbed anyone in my life," she said, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "I'm innocent of these charges." Sheriff Maxwell gripped her arm tightly. "Save it for the judge, miss." As they paraded her through the main street, an obvious attempt to humiliate her and satisfy the townsfolk's desire for justice, Cora caught sympathetic glances from a few faces. Mrs. Harris, the kindly widow who had hired her for seamstress work, looked distressed but quickly averted her eyes when the sheriff glanced her way. The baker's wife whispered something to her husband, who frowned deeply at the display. Suddenly, a commotion arose at the far end of the street. Heads turned as a rider appeared, pushing a lathered horse at a dangerous pace through the crowded thoroughfare. "Make way!" the rider shouted, and something in that voice sent a jolt of recognition through Cora. The crowd parted, revealing a tall man astride a magnificent black stallion. His clothes were trail-worn, his face covered in dust and stubble. But Cora would have known him anywhere. Isaac Kincaid had grown from the lanky boy she remembered into a formidable man, but his eyes, those intense blue eyes, were exactly as she recalled. For a moment, their gazes locked across the distance, and the years melted away. Then reality crashed back as Sheriff Maxwell's grip tightened painfully on her arm. "Kincaid," the sheriff spat. "This doesn't concern you. Keep riding." Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion, tossing his reins to a nearby post. "I believe it does concern me when you're planning to hang an innocent woman." He approached slowly, his stance casual, but his eyes alert. Cora noticed his hand never strayed far from his holstered revolver. The crowd, sensing drama, fell silent. "I have a witness who says Miss Patterson was nowhere near that stagecoach robbery," Isaac continued, projecting his voice so everyone could hear. "And I have evidence that points to who actually committed the crime." Sheriff Maxwell's face darkened. "Evidence? What evidence could a rancher possibly have about a robbery?" "The kind that proves your witness is either mistaken or lying," Isaac replied evenly. "The kind that will make Judge Parsons very interested when he arrives." A murmur swept through the onlookers. The sheriff's jaw clenched visibly as he calculated his options. "Take her back to the cell," he ordered his deputies. "Kincaid, you and I need to have a private conversation." As they led her away, Cora caught Isaac's eye once more. He gave her a slight nod of promise, and for the first time since her arrest, hope flickered in her heart. Back in her cell, Cora paced as much as her chains would allow. Hours passed with no sign of Isaac or the sheriff. The deputy on duty avoided her questions, busying himself with paperwork, and occasionally stepping outside for reasons unknown. When the jailhouse door finally opened again, it was Isaac who entered, followed by a reluctant-looking Sheriff Maxwell and a distinguished older man Cora didn't recognize. "Miss Patterson," the older man said, approaching her cell. "I'm Judge Parsons. Seems I've been summoned a bit earlier than planned." Cora's eyes widened. "But I thought you weren't due for 3 days." "I was in Copper Springs handling another matter when Mr. Kincaid's messenger found me," the judge explained. "He was quite insistent that there was an urgent matter of justice that required immediate attention." She looked at Isaac, who stood with arms crossed, his expression unreadable except for a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Judge Parsons cleared his throat. "Based on new evidence and testimony presented by Mr. Kincaid, I'm ordering your immediate release, Miss Patterson. The charges against you are being dropped." The words didn't immediately register. "I'm free?" "Sheriff Maxwell has agreed that there was a misunderstanding," the judge continued diplomatically. "The actual perpetrator has been identified and is being pursued as we speak." Sheriff Maxwell did not look at her as he grudgingly unlocked the cell door. "Your personal effects are on my desk," he muttered. In a daze, Cora stepped out of the cell. A deputy removed her shackles, the iron cuffs leaving angry red marks on her wrists. She rubbed them absently, still processing what had just happened. "I would like to extend the town's apologies for this unfortunate incident," Judge Parsons said, shooting a stern look at the sheriff. "I trust suitable compensation will be arranged for your wrongful detention." "I don't want money," Cora found her voice at last. "I just want to clear my name. People were calling me a thief, and worse this morning." "A public announcement will be made," the judge assured her. "Now, I suggest you get some rest, young lady. You've had a trying ordeal." As the judge and sheriff left to handle the formalities, Isaac finally approached her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in his features, the dark circles under his eyes speaking of his sleepless journey. "You rode all night," she said softly. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I would have ridden for a week if needed." "How did you know I was here? How did you prove my innocence so quickly?" Isaac shook his head. "Let's get you somewhere comfortable first. You look dead on your feet, and I'm not much better. There's a decent hotel across from the general store." Cora nodded, suddenly aware of how truly exhausted she was. "Thank you, Isaac. I don't know how to repay you for this." "You don't owe me anything, Cora Patterson," he said, and the way he spoke her name made her heart skip. "But I'd appreciate the chance to catch up once we've both had some sleep." They stepped out of the jailhouse into the late afternoon sunlight. The crowd from earlier had dispersed, though a few curious onlookers still lingered. Isaac collected his horse and offered Cora his arm, which she gratefully accepted. As they walked slowly down the street, she felt the weight of the past few days begin to lift, replaced by questions about the man beside her and the mysterious evidence that had secured her freedom. The Redemption Hotel was modest by big city standards, but luxurious compared to the jail cell Cora had just left. The proprietor, Mrs. Landry, fussed over her when she learned of the situation, insisting on sending up a hot bath and a meal. "You poor dear," the older woman clucked sympathetically. "I never believed those accusations for a moment. A lady with your refined manner, robbing stagecoaches? Ridiculous." In the privacy of her room, Cora sank into the first real bath she'd had in days, letting the warm water soothe her aching body. Her mind, however, remained active, filled with questions about Isaac Kincaid. How had he known she was in trouble? What evidence had he presented to the judge? And most puzzling of all, why had he gone to such lengths for someone he hadn't seen in years? After bathing and changing into the clean dress Mrs. Landry had provided, her own clothes being deemed beyond salvation after days in the cell, Cora sat by the window, watching the street below as twilight descended on Redemption. The town was beginning to look different to her now, less hostile, though she wondered if she could ever truly feel at home here after what had happened. A knock at her door roused her from these thoughts. "It's Isaac," came the familiar voice. She opened the door to find him freshly bathed and shaved, dressed in clean clothes that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. For a moment they simply looked at each other, both seemingly struck by how much the other had changed, yet remained fundamentally the same. "I've arranged for dinner in the hotel dining room," he said, "if you're feeling up to it." "I am," she replied, suddenly self-conscious about her borrowed dress and hastily arranged hair. "Though I'm afraid I'm not looking my best." Isaac's gaze was warm as it traveled over her. "You look beautiful, Cora. You always did." The dining room was mercifully empty except for an elderly couple in the far corner. As they settled at a table near the window, Cora finally asked the questions that had been burning in her mind. "How did you know I was in trouble? And what evidence did you have that convinced the judge so quickly?" Isaac sipped his water, gathering his thoughts. "I learned you were in jail from Billy the stable boy who works at the livery. He overheard talk about a red-haired woman being held for the stagecoach robbery and remembered I'd asked about you when you first arrived in town." Cora raised an eyebrow. "You asked about me?" A hint of color touched Isaac's cheeks. "I saw you that day by the general store. I was going to come say hello, but got called away on ranch business. When I came back later, you were gone. I asked around and learned you'd taken a room at the boarding house and were working for Mrs. Harris." "And the evidence?" she pressed, touched by the revelation but still curious about the more immediate matter. "That was partly luck, and partly knowing the right people," Isaac explained as their food arrived. "The stage driver, Marcus Wells, is an old friend. When I described the situation to him, he admitted he never got a clear look at the robber. He only told the sheriff it was a woman with reddish hair because that's what Sheriff Maxwell kept suggesting to him." Cora's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The sheriff was leading the witness?" Isaac nodded grimly. "Maxwell has been under pressure to solve a string of robberies. When you showed up a newcomer with distinctive hair, you made an easy target. But there's more. On my way to town, I stopped at Coyote Creek Way Station. The attendant there remembered serving a couple the night before the robbery, a man and a woman. He described the woman as having hair the color of sunset." "Another redhead," Cora murmured. "Yes, but not you. When I showed him your description, he was certain it wasn't you. The woman he saw was older, with a scar on her cheek. More importantly, he overheard them talking about the stage schedule." Isaac leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I tracked down where they'd camped that night and found this." He reached into his pocket and produced a handkerchief with elaborate embroidery. "It has the initials VM. Violet Morgan," Cora breathed. Isaac looked startled. "You know her?" "Not personally, but I've heard stories since arriving. She and her husband are supposed to be notorious swindlers who've been working their way across the territory. Mrs. Harris mentioned them when warning me about the dangers out west." "Well, your Mrs. Harris was right. The Morgans are well known to the law in 3 territories, though they usually stick to confidence schemes, not armed robbery. They must be getting desperate." Cora shook her head, amazed. "And the judge accepted this as evidence?" "The handkerchief alone wouldn't have been enough, but I also brought along Mrs. Taylor from the dress shop, who swore she saw you working at Mrs. Harris's house during the time of the robbery. And I had statements from 3 other witnesses who could place the Morgans near the robbery site." "You gathered all that evidence in less than a day?" Cora asked, astounded. Isaac shrugged, but couldn't hide a pleased smile. "I didn't sleep much." They finished their meal, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, memories of their childhood in Missouri, the changes they'd both seen since those days. Isaac told her about his ranch, the Lazy K, which he'd built from nearly nothing over the past 3 years. "It's not much yet," he said with characteristic modesty. 60 head of cattle, a decent house, good water rights. But it's growing." "It sounds wonderful," Cora replied sincerely. A place of your own. Something you've built with your own hands that's more than most people ever achieve. As the evening wore on, Cora found herself increasingly drawn to this grown version of the boy she had once known. The gangly youth had matured into a man of quiet confidence and unwavering principle, a man who had ridden through the night and moved heaven and earth to save her. When they finally said goodnight at her door, there was a moment of awkward silence, as if neither quite knew how to end the evening. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked finally. "Will you stay in redemption?" Cora hesitated. "I don't know. Mrs. Harris has been kind, and I was building a client list for my seamstress work before all this, but I'm not sure how people will see me now." "The truth will spread," he assured her. "Judge Parsons made sure of that with his announcement this evening. Still, it might be easier to make a fresh start somewhere else." Isaac took a deep breath. "The Lazy K isn't far, just a day's ride. There's plenty of work for a skilled seamstress in the area. And—" He paused, then continued more softly. "I'd be nearby?" The implication hung in the air between them, full of possibility. "I'll think about it," Cora promised, her cheeks warming. "Thank you again, Isaac. For everything." "Get some rest," he said. "We can talk more tomorrow." Alone in her room, Cora lay awake despite her exhaustion, her mind replaying the events of the day and especially her conversations with Isaac. She had come west seeking a new beginning, never expecting to reconnect with someone from her past. Yet somehow, in this remote corner of the Arizona territory, fate had brought Isaac Kincaid back into her life at precisely the moment she needed him most. For the first time since her arrest, Cora fell asleep with a smile on her face. Dawn broke clear and bright over Redemption, the early light casting long shadows down the main street as Isaac saddled Thunder in front of the hotel. He'd slept better than expected, the exhaustion of his journey and the relief of securing Cora's freedom combining to give him 6 solid hours of rest. Now, refreshed and determined, he prepared to handle one last piece of business before proposing his plan to Cora. "Fine animal," remarked a voice behind him. Isaac turned to find Judge Parsons observing his horse with an appreciative eye. "Thank you, Your Honor," Isaac replied, tightening the cinch strap. "He earned a rest after our ride, but he's eager to move this morning." The judge nodded, then glanced around to ensure they were relatively alone. "I wanted a word before I depart for Yuma. This business with Sheriff Maxwell concerns me." Isaac paused in his preparations. "How so, sir?" "A law officer willing to railroad an innocent woman for the sake of closing a case is no law officer at all," Parsons said grimly. "I've sent telegrams to the territorial governor and the U.S. Marshal's office. There will be an investigation." "I appreciate that, Judge. Maxwell's been cutting corners for years, but this was beyond the pale." The judge studied Isaac thoughtfully. "You went to extraordinary lengths for Miss Patterson. Known her long, have you?" "Since we were children, though we lost touch for several years," Isaac admitted. "But I'd have done the same for anyone wrongfully accused." Judge Parsons smiled knowingly. "Perhaps, but perhaps not with quite the same vigor. In any case, you did good work gathering evidence. Ever consider a career in law?" Isaac laughed. "No, sir. Ranching suits me fine." "Well, if you change your mind, the territory needs men with your sense of justice." With that, the judge tipped his hat and continued down the street toward the stage office. Isaac mounted Thunder and rode toward the sheriff's office, his mood turning serious again. As expected, he found Sheriff Maxwell at his desk, looking haggard and irritable. "Kincaid," the lawman acknowledged coldly. "Come to gloat?" "No," Isaac replied, remaining in the doorway. "I came to make sure you're actually pursuing the Morgans. They're the real criminals here." Maxwell's face flushed with anger. "I've sent telegrams to every law office within 100 miles. We'll catch them." "See that you do. And Sheriff?" Isaac's voice hardened. If anything happens to Miss Patterson while she remains in redemption, any harassment, any accidents, I'll hold you personally responsible. Is that a threat? Maxwell stood, his hand drifting toward his gun. It's a promise. From one man to another. Isaac held the sheriff's gaze steadily until the older man looked away first. Get out of my office, Kincaid. You've done enough damage. Isaac tipped his hat mockingly. Pleasure as always, Sheriff. Outside, Isaac rode slowly up the street to Mrs. Harris's dress shop. The elderly widow greeted him warmly, clucking over Cora's ordeal and offering effusive thanks for his intervention. That poor girl has had such a difficult time, Mrs. Harris said, as she led him into her back parlor. So brave, though. Never complained once about the long hours or the pricking of her fingers as she learned the finer points of my designs. She always was determined, Isaac agreed. Mrs. Harris, I was wondering if you might help me with something. By the time he returned to the hotel, Cora was waiting in the lobby, looking much more like herself in a simple but elegant blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Good morning, she greeted him. I was beginning to think you'd left town. Without saying goodbye? Never. He offered his arm. I thought we might take a walk. If you're feeling up to it. They strolled through Redemption's awakening streets, with Isaac pointing out landmarks and sharing local history. To his relief, the townsfolk they passed were either politely cordial or deliberately gave Cora respectful space. None of the previous day's hostility remained visible. News travels fast in small towns, Isaac explained as they passed the smithy, where the blacksmith raised his hammer in greeting. By now, everyone knows Judge Parsons cleared your name, and that the real culprits were the Morgans. It's a welcome change, Cora admitted. Though I still feel everyone's eyes on me. That might have less to do with the arrest and more to do with being seen walking with an eligible bachelor, Isaac teased, earning a blush and a light swat on his arm. They reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open country. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the sky, their snow-capped peaks shimmering in the morning light. Beautiful, isn't it? Isaac said, coming to a stop. That's the direction of my ranch, about 40 miles that way, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it year-round. Cora gazed at the landscape, shielding her eyes from the sun. It sounds lovely. Peaceful. It is. Isaac turned to face her. Cora, I've been thinking about what happens next. For you, I mean. She looked at him curiously. As have I. Mrs. Harris has offered me my position back, with increased wages as a form of apology from the town council. That's generous, Isaac acknowledged. But I have another proposal. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a carefully wrapped package, which he handed to her. Cora opened it to reveal several pieces of the finest fabric she had seen since leaving St. Louis. Rich velvets, delicate silks, and sturdy but elegant cotton prints. Her fingers caressed the materials reverently. These are exquisite, she breathed. But I don't understand. I spoke with Mrs. Harris this morning. She agrees that your talent deserves a wider clientele than Redemption can provide. Isaac took a deep breath. There's a settlement growing near my ranch, mostly respectable folks. Families building homes and businesses. They need someone with your skills. Someone who can create quality garments without them having to travel to Tucson or Phoenix. Cora's eyes widened as she began to understand. You're offering me a business opportunity? More than that, Isaac said softly. I'm offering you a chance at a fresh start. In a place where nobody knows about your time in jail, where you'll be judged only by your character and your work. He reached out tentatively, taking her hand in his. And I'm offering you the chance for us to rediscover each other, to see if the friendship we once had might grow into something more. Cora looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his earnest face. You're asking me to move near your ranch? To start a business there? Yes. There's a small but sturdy cabin on the edge of my property. It was the original homesteader's place before I built the main house. With some fixing up, it could serve as both a home and a shop for you. And where does that leave us? She asked directly, her gaze unwavering. Isaac smiled, appreciating her forthrightness. As neighbors, to start. Friends, certainly. And perhaps, in time, something more if that's what we both want. I'm not asking for any promises, Cora. Just a chance. Cora was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful as she gazed at the distant mountains. Then she squeezed his hand. I'd need to settle things with Mrs. Harris properly. And gather my belongings from the boarding house. Isaac's heart leapt. Is that a yes? It's a yes, she confirmed, a smile blossoming on her face. After what happened here, a fresh start sounds perfect. And the chance to reconnect with you. She paused, a hint of the old shyness he remembered from their youth crossing her features. Well, that's worth the risk of moving again. Joy surged through Isaac, tempered by a determination not to rush things. Cora had been through a terrible ordeal, and he wanted to give her time and space to heal. But standing here with her hand in his, the future suddenly seemed brighter than it had in years. When can you be ready to leave? He asked. Give me 2 days, she replied. I need to properly thank Mrs. Harris and make arrangements for my clients here. 2 days it is, Isaac agreed. And Cora? I promise you won't regret this decision. Her smile deepened, reaching her eyes with a warmth that made his breath catch. I already don't. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity. True to her word, Cora settled her affairs in redemption with grace and efficiency. Mrs. Harris, while sad to lose her assistant, was supportive of the move, even contributing additional fabric and patterns to help establish Cora's new business. Isaac, meanwhile, arranged for transportation, purchasing a sturdy wagon and a gentle mare for Cora to drive. He also sent word ahead to his ranch foreman, Thomas, instructing him to begin preparations on the cabin. On the morning of their departure, a small group gathered to see them off. Mrs. Harris, the baker and his wife, and even Deputy Collins came to wish Cora well. Notably absent was Sheriff Maxwell, who had maintained a conspicuous distance since Judge Parsons' departure. You take care now, Mrs. Harris said, embracing Cora warmly. And remember, you always have a place here if things don't work out. Thank you for everything, Cora replied, genuinely moved by the woman's kindness. As they prepared to leave, a commotion at the end of the street drew their attention. A dust cloud approached rapidly, resolving into a rider pushing his horse hard. The man pulled up sharply before them, his expression urgent. Kincaid, he called out, recognizing Isaac immediately. There's trouble at Coyote Creek Way Station. The Morgans were spotted there last night. Isaac's expression darkened. They're still in the area? I thought they'd have fled the territory by now. Apparently not. Word is they're planning another job, the gold shipment coming through tomorrow. Isaac glanced at Cora, torn between his desire to get her safely to the ranch and his sense of duty to stop the criminals who had nearly cost her her freedom. Cora read his dilemma immediately. We need to warn the sheriff, she said firmly. Maxwell won't do anything, Isaac replied grimly. He's too embarrassed by the whole affair. Then we'll have to handle it ourselves, Cora stated, surprising him with her determination. Those people framed me, Isaac. I can't just ride away knowing they're about to hurt someone else. Isaac studied her face, recognizing the resolve in her eyes. It could be dangerous. I spent 3 days in jail because of them, facing a hanging, she reminded him. I'm not afraid. Her courage stirred something profound in Isaac's heart. With a nod of decision, he turned to the messenger. Tell Thomas to meet us at Coyote Creek with 3 of the ranch hands. We'll approach from the west. The man acknowledged the instruction and galloped off, leaving Isaac and Cora to alter their plans. Are you sure about this? Isaac asked her one more time. We could still head straight for the ranch. Cora shook her head. Justice matters, Isaac. You taught me that when you rode all night to free me. The way station at Coyote Creek was a simple affair, a low adobe building with a stable attached, situated beside the only reliable water source for 20 miles. As they approached cautiously in the late afternoon, Isaac was relieved to spot Thomas and three of his most trusted hands already positioned discreetly among the rocks overlooking the station. "Stay with the wagon," Isaac instructed Cora as he prepared to join his men. "If there's any trouble, don't hesitate to drive out of here." "Be careful," she replied, her eyes conveying more than her words. Isaac slipped away, moving stealthily to where Thomas waited. "Boss?" The foreman greeted him quietly. "Spotted a man and woman inside about an hour ago. Matches the description of the Morgans." "Anyone else?" "Station keeper and his son. Looks like they're being held against their will." Isaac considered their options. "We need to draw them out, separate them if possible." "I could create a distraction," Thomas suggested. "Ride in like a regular traveler." "Too risky," Isaac countered. "They might recognize you as one of my men." As they debated strategy, movement below caught their attention. The station door opened and a woman with distinctive red hair emerged, stretching casually in the evening air. Even from a distance, the scar on her cheek was visible. Violet Morgan, just as the way station attendant had described. "She's alone," Isaac observed. "This might be our chance to even the odds." Before they could act, however, something unexpected happened. Cora's wagon began moving from their hiding place, rolling openly toward the station. "What is she doing?" Isaac hissed, alarmed. But as he watched Cora's deliberate approach, he began to understand her strategy. Below, Violet Morgan had noticed the approaching wagon and was watching with evident curiosity. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough to draw attention, but not immediately threatening. "She's creating the distraction herself," Thomas realized. "Smart lady." "And reckless," Isaac added, though he couldn't help but admire Cora's courage. "Be ready to move in. If they make any aggressive move toward her, we act immediately." They watched tensely as Cora pulled her wagon to a stop before the station. From their vantage point, they couldn't hear the conversation, but they could see Cora gesture as if asking for directions or assistance. Violet Morgan appeared to respond cautiously but without immediate suspicion. "She's drawing her away from the building," Thomas noted as the two women moved toward the water trough. "Now's our chance," Isaac decided. "Thomas, you and Jim circle around to the back. Jake and I will approach from this side. Remember, there are hostages inside." The men moved with practiced efficiency, using the gathering dusk as cover. Isaac kept one eye on Cora as he made his approach, ready to abandon the plan if she appeared in danger. But she was playing her part flawlessly, engaging Violet in animated conversation while steadily maneuvering to keep the woman's back to the men's approach. Isaac had nearly reached the side of the building when disaster struck. The station door opened again and Morgan's husband emerged, immediately spotting the men closing in. He shouted a warning to his wife and reached for his gun. What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion. Violet Morgan spun around, drawing a derringer from her sleeve and grabbing Cora as a shield. Her husband fired wildly toward Isaac and his men, forcing them to take cover. "Drop your weapons or the girl dies," Violet shouted, pressing the small but deadly gun against Cora's temple. Isaac raised his hands slowly, signaling his men to hold their fire. "Nobody needs to get hurt here," he called back. "Throw out your gun, Kincaid," Violet demanded. "I know who you are. You're the one who ruined our plans in redemption." Isaac complied reluctantly, tossing his revolver into the dirt. "Let her go, Mrs. Morgan. The law already knows about you and your husband. There's no escaping this time." "We'll be the judge of that," Daniel Morgan snarled, emerging fully from the station with the keeper's young son as his own hostage. "We've evaded the law across 3 territories. We'll do it again." A tense standoff ensued, with both sides assessing their limited options. Isaac's mind raced, searching for a way to resolve the situation without bloodshed. His eyes met Cora's, and though he could see her fear, he also saw something else: determination and a silent communication that she was prepared to act when the moment came. That moment arrived unexpectedly when the station keeper's son, a boy of perhaps 12, suddenly stomped hard on Morgan's foot and twisted free of his grasp. The distraction was momentary, but sufficient. In the split second that Violet's attention wavered, Cora drove her elbow backward with surprising force, catching her captor in the ribs. Isaac didn't hesitate. He dove for his discarded weapon as Thomas and the others emerged from their positions, guns trained on the Morgans. Within moments, the situation had reversed entirely. "Drop it, Morgan," Isaac ordered, his revolver now leveled steadily at Daniel Morgan's chest. "It's over." The outlaw hesitated, his eyes darting between the multiple guns now pointed at him and his wife, who was doubled over from Cora's blow. With a curse, he finally let his weapon fall. "Tie them up," Isaac directed his men, keeping his own gun trained on the couple until they were securely bound. Only then did he rush to Cora, who was leaning against the wagon wheel, shaking slightly but otherwise unharmed. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he told her, his voice rough with relief as he checked her for injuries. "Perhaps a bit of both," she admitted with a shaky smile. "But it worked." Isaac shook his head in wonder. "You are remarkable, Cora Patterson." Their eyes held for a long moment, the shared danger creating a bond that transcended words. Then, mindful of their audience, Isaac reluctantly stepped back. "Thomas, send Jake to notify the marshal in Tucson," he instructed his foreman. "The rest of us will keep watch until he arrives. These two aren't escaping again." The night passed slowly at the way station. The Morgans, securely bound and under constant guard, had eventually fallen into sullen silence after their initial protests and threats. The station keeper and his son were grateful for the rescue, providing coffee and a simple meal as the hours wore on. Cora sat with Isaac on the station's small porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the desert night's chill. Above them, stars scattered across the sky in breathtaking profusion, more than she'd ever seen in St. Louis, or even Redemption. "It's beautiful," she murmured, gazing upward, "like diamonds on velvet." Isaac followed her gaze. "One of the things I love most about this country. No matter what troubles we face down here, those stars keep shining, reminding us how small our problems really are." Cora turned to study his profile, highlighted by the soft glow from the station's windows. "Why did you really come for me, Isaac?" "The truth." He was quiet for a long moment. "When I saw you in town that day, it was like finding a piece of myself I hadn't realized was missing. We were just kids when you left Missouri, but I never forgot you." He met her eyes. "Then to hear you were in danger, facing a hanging for something you didn't do. I couldn't let that happen. Not when I'd only just found you again." His honesty touched her deeply. "I thought about you too, over the years," she admitted. "Wondered what had become of the boy who used to pull my braids and then bring me wildflowers as an apology." Isaac chuckled. "I was rather hopeless at expressing my feelings." "And now?" Cora asked softly. Instead of answering with words, Isaac leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so gentle it was almost reverent. Cora responded with a sweetness that made his heart soar. When they finally parted, both were slightly breathless. "Does that answer your question?" Isaac asked, his voice husky. Cora smiled. "I think we're getting better at expressing ourselves." The marshal from Tucson arrived shortly after dawn, accompanied by 2 deputies and, surprisingly, Judge Parsons. The Morgans were quickly transferred to the lawman's custody. with the judge taking detailed statements from Isaac, Cora, and the station keeper. "You've done the territory a great service," Judge Parsons told them as the prisoners were loaded into a prison wagon. "The Morgans will face multiple charges now: armed robbery, kidnapping, attempted murder. They won't see freedom for many years, if ever." "What about Sheriff Maxwell?" Cora asked. "His willingness to prosecute me without proper evidence nearly cost me my life." The judge's expression turned serious. "That matter is being addressed, Miss Patterson. Maxwell has been suspended pending a full investigation. I suspect Redemption will be looking for a new sheriff very soon." With the Morgans safely on their way to justice, Isaac and Cora resumed their journey to the Lazy K Ranch. The delay had cost them a day, but neither minded. The experience had deepened their connection in ways that might otherwise have taken weeks or months. They traveled at a leisurely pace, with Isaac pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days establishing the ranch. Cora drank in the scenery: the vast open spaces, the dramatic rock formations, the occasional glimpse of wildlife. It was a world away from the crowded streets of St. Louis or even the modest town of Redemption. "Are you having second thoughts?" Isaac asked when she fell silent for a time. Cora shook her head. "Not at all. I'm just absorbing it all. It's so different from anywhere I've lived before. So wild and open." "It can be harsh," he acknowledged, "but there's a freedom here you won't find back east. Room to breathe, to build something that's truly your own." "I like the sound of that," she replied with genuine enthusiasm. "After everything that's happened, creating something new sounds perfect." They crested a rise in the late afternoon, and Isaac reined in his horse. "There it is," he said with undisguised pride, "the Lazy K." Below them stretched a verdant valley, bisected by a gleaming ribbon of creek water. A substantial log house stood in a cleared area, with outbuildings, corrals, and a barn arranged nearby. Cattle grazed in the distance, and smoke curled invitingly from the house's chimney. "It's beautiful," Cora breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. "You've built all this in just 3 years?" "With a lot of hard work and good people helping," Isaac confirmed. "And there," he pointed to a smaller cabin set slightly apart from the main complex, "is your new home, if you want it." Even from a distance, Cora could see that care had been taken with the cabin. Fresh lumber for repairs was stacked nearby, and what appeared to be new curtains hung in the windows. "You were very confident I'd accept your offer," she observed with a raised eyebrow. Isaac had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Hopeful, not confident. I telegraphed ahead after you agreed, and it seems Thomas took the initiative with some improvements." They continued down into the valley, receiving a warm welcome as they approached the main house. Thomas's wife, Sarah, emerged with a broad smile, while ranch hands called greetings to Isaac and curious looks at Cora. "Welcome to the Lazy K, Miss Patterson," Sarah said warmly. "We've heard so much about you." "Thank you," Cora replied, touched by the welcome. "And please, call me Cora." "I've prepared supper in the main house," Sarah continued, "and the cabin is ready whenever you'd like to see it." Cora looked questioningly at Isaac, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to see it now, if that's all right." The cabin exceeded her expectations. Though small, it had been meticulously cleaned and repaired. The main room was arranged as a combination sitting area and workroom, with a sturdy table positioned to catch the natural light from 2 windows. A small bedroom and kitchen completed the space, all simply but comfortably furnished. "We weren't sure how you'd want to arrange your workspace," Sarah explained as they toured. "So we left that for you to decide." "It's perfect," Cora said sincerely. "Better than I could have hoped for." "The ranch wives are already excited to have a proper seamstress nearby," Sarah confided. "And there are several families in the settlement who've been making do with mail-order clothing. You'll have no shortage of customers." After the tour, they gathered for a hearty supper in the main house, with Thomas and several of the senior ranch hands joining them. The conversation flowed easily, with much good-natured teasing directed at Isaac and curious questions for Cora about her skills and background. "So you really spent 3 days in jail?" asked one of the younger hands, earning a sharp look from Thomas. "I did," Cora confirmed, refusing to be embarrassed. "For a crime I didn't commit. But thanks to Isaac and his determination to see justice done, I was freed." "Boss rode 40 miles without stopping," Thomas told the table proudly. "Nearly killed that stallion of his." "It was worth every mile," Isaac said quietly, his eyes meeting Cora's across the table. Later, as twilight deepened into night, Isaac walked Cora to her new cabin. Lanterns had been lit inside, casting a welcoming glow through the windows. "Will you be comfortable here?" he asked as they paused at the door. "Very," she assured him. "It's charming, Isaac, and knowing it's mine, at least for now, makes it all the more special." "It can be yours for as long as you want it," he told her earnestly. "No pressure, Cora. I meant what I said about giving us time to rediscover each other." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "I appreciate that. After everything that's happened, a little peace and stability sounds wonderful." "Then that's what you'll have." He hesitated, then bent to kiss her lightly. "Sleep well, Cora Patterson. Tomorrow, you begin your new life." The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that suited Cora perfectly. She arranged her cabin to serve as both home and workshop, positioning her sewing table to capture the best light throughout the day. Sarah introduced her to the neighboring ranchers' wives, who were delighted to have access to her skills. Word spread quickly to the settlement, bringing a steady stream of customers eager for well-made clothing. Isaac, true to his word, gave her space to establish herself, though he visited often, sometimes bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from the hives on the far side of the ranch, wildflowers that reminded him of those he'd given her as a boy, a beautifully crafted wooden sewing box made by one of his hands who had once been a carpenter. Their relationship developed naturally, built on shared memories and new experiences. They took rides together on her days off, exploring the ranch and surrounding countryside. Isaac showed her his favorite spots: a hidden waterfall, a mesa with views that stretched for miles, an ancient cottonwood tree where he sometimes went to think. In turn, Cora shared her dreams for her business, her memories of St. Louis, and gradually, the troubles that had prompted her move west. Her father's death, her mother's remarriage to a controlling man who resented her independence, her decision to make her own way rather than accept an arranged marriage to one of her stepfather's business associates. "You were brave to leave everything behind," Isaac remarked one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors. "It didn't feel brave at the time," she admitted. "Just necessary. I couldn't live the life they had planned for me." "And now? Is this life what you hoped for when you came west?" Cora considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "It's better. Despite everything, the jail, the Morgans, all of it, I've found something here I didn't expect." "What's that?" Isaac asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. "A place where I truly belong," she said simply. "And someone who sees me for who I really am." Their kiss was deeper this time, filled with the growing feelings neither could deny any longer. When they eventually parted, both knew something fundamental had changed between them. "I'm falling in love with you, Cora Patterson," Isaac confessed, his voice husky. "Probably have been since we were young, though I was too foolish to recognize it then." Cora touched his face gently. "I think I've loved you since you rode into redemption that day, ready to move heaven and earth to save me." "Is it too soon to say such things?" he wondered, holding her close. "After everything we've been through, I think we've earned the right to be honest about our feelings. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular changes to the landscape, news reached them from Redemption. Sheriff Maxwell had been officially removed from office, with Deputy Collins appointed as his replacement. The Morgans had been convicted on all charges and sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. And most surprisingly, Judge Parsons had recommended Isaac for an appointment as a circuit judge, an offer he was seriously considering. It would mean traveling for part of each month, he explained to Cora as they discussed the possibility. Covering the smaller settlements that don't have their own judges, but it would allow me to ensure that what happened to you doesn't happen to others. I think you should accept, Cora told him supportively. You have a natural sense of justice, Isaac. The territory needs men like you in positions where you can make a difference. And us? He asked, taking her hands in his. I wouldn't want my absences to come between us. Cora smiled. I have my business here, friends I've made, a home I love. I'll be here when you return from your circuits, and perhaps occasionally I might travel with you. Relief washed over his features. You're certain? I am, but I do have one condition. Name it, he said immediately. Cora took a deep breath. That before you accept the position, you make an honest woman of me. Joy blazed across Isaac's face. Cora Patterson, are you proposing to me? I believe I am. She laughed. Unless you'd prefer to do the asking? In answer, Isaac dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. I was planning to do this properly next week, on the anniversary of the day I rode into Redemption. I even have a ring hidden in my desk. He gazed up at her with such love that Cora felt her heart might burst. But since you've beaten me to it, Cora Patterson, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in all things, for the rest of our days? Yes, she whispered, tears of happiness filling her eyes. With all my heart, yes. Their wedding took place a month later on the Lazy K, with Judge Parsons officiating. Mrs. Harris made the journey from Redemption, bringing with her the surprising news that she planned to sell her shop and move to Tucson. Deputy now Sheriff Collins came as well, along with several others who had supported Cora during her ordeal. The ceremony itself was simple but beautiful, held beneath the ancient cottonwood that Isaac loved. Cora wore a gown of her own creation, ivory silk with delicate embroidery that had taken her weeks of evening work to complete. Isaac, looking more handsome than ever in a new suit, watched her approach with undisguised adoration. Dearly beloved, Judge Parsons began, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. We are gathered here today to witness the union of two people whose path to each other reminds us that even in our darkest hours, love can find a way. As they exchanged vows, Cora thought back to that terrible cell in Redemption, the cold shackles on her wrists, the fear that had been her constant companion. How could she have known then that those dark days would lead to this standing before the man she loved, surrounded by friends, beginning a life that promised joy and purpose? I now pronounce you husband and wife, Judge Parsons declared. Mr. Kincaid, you may kiss your bride. The guests erupted in cheers as Isaac swept her into his arms, sealing their union with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. Later, as twilight settled over the celebration and lanterns were lit around the ranch yard, Isaac led Cora away from the festivities for a moment of privacy. Happy, Mrs. Kincaid? He asked, his arms encircling her waist. Completely, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Though I still can't quite believe how we found our way here. I can, Isaac said with conviction. From the moment I heard you were in trouble, I knew I would do whatever it took to reach you. Some things are simply meant to be. Cora turned in his arms to face him, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if the Morgans had chosen another town, Another victim for their scheme? Sometimes, he admitted. But then, I remember something my father used to say, that the Lord works in mysterious ways. Perhaps we needed that trial to find our way back to each other. A rather extreme form of divine intervention, Cora observed with a smile. Maybe so, Isaac laughed, but standing here with you now, I can't find it in me to regret any of it. Even those days when you were in that jail cell and I was riding through the night, I felt a purpose clearer than anything I'd known before. He touched her cheek tenderly. You were always meant to be free, Cora, and I was always meant to be the one to help you find that freedom. And now we're both free, she murmured. Free to build a life together, to create something beautiful from all we've endured. Isaac kissed her again, pouring all his love and promise into the gesture. That's exactly what we'll do, my love, starting today and for all the days to come. From the ranch yard came the sounds of music and laughter, their friends and family celebrating the union that had begun in such unlikely circumstances. As they walked hand in hand back toward the festivities, Cora's heart was full to overflowing with gratitude and joy. The chains that had once bound her in a jail cell were now just a memory, replaced by the unbreakable bonds of love that would sustain them through all the adventures that lay ahead. And as the stars emerged one by one in the vast desert sky, Isaac and Cora Kincaid stepped forward together into their future, stronger for the trials they had faced and certain of the love that had brought them home at last.